everyone, welcome to the weekly Rho Mobile webinar. Today's topic is going to be the metadata framework. So for those who are curious, the metadata framework, it allows you to send definitions of your views based on data that is sent from the server instead of being coded into your ERB files. What this allows you to do is, if you have an application that has a schema that varies or a view definition that varies, for example, like an SRM application where you show different fields for different users or allow you to configure the order of the fields and stuff that are displayed on the screen. Using the metadata framework, you can have those definitions sent to the client to have the views change without having to rebuild your client. So the way metadata is defined is in your source adapters, and it's set as nested hashes. So if you see on the screen here, here's some example definitions of metadata. There's a view. The views can have children. Those children can have yet more children, and they're rendered with templates based on the type. So the type here, for example, this one is called an IUI panel, and so it will render the IUI panel template. This one is a table, so it will render the table template. And this one is a labeled row, which is the labeled row template. And so there's various different templates that are available, and you can also create your own templates and include them. And the list of available templates will be documented on this metadata page. It has several of them that exist already. There's some more that exist that needs to be added, and will be updated by the end of the day. There's reserved labels on a template. These ones are used internally by the metadata framework, and so you can't use these labels inside your hashes because they're reserved for the way the metadata framework works and how you arrange the definitions. Otherwise, you can put any other key value pairs in the hashes and pick them up in templates. Children in the metadata framework is defined by specifying a children key and then giving it an array of the children to render. For example, this one here has a table and it renders it with 3 rows. So the output of this would be a table, and then inside the table it would have 3 copies of this row based on the labeled row template. The third type of children is to have something called repeatable. So what the repeatable does is it takes a data binding key, and if it's an array, it iterates through all of the members and creates a row, or basically reproduces all the children for each one of those members in that array. And the data binding is an interesting thing. The data binding is how you put data into your templates. The way keys are performed is with a slash. It's very much like XPath. So if you have a data element at data, you can have key and then another key, and it will basically go through the different elements. So you can see an example here of, here's the data array, If you use this in your metadata definition, it gets replaced with array because it's accessing data key 1, which is this, element 0, which is array. And you can see here it has data key 2, which is the second hash value, and then this, which is another hash value. And so this works with arrays, hashes, and method calls. So if, for example, your element here is a class that has a method called this, well, not this, since this is a reserved word, but if it had a method, then that method would be called if it's not an array or a hash. And finally, the last part of the metadata is the validation. The validation is based on regular expressions, and so you can call the validator and it will take the field and run the validation on it to verify. Basically, it verifies what that field is submitted as. So that's sort of an overview of the metadata framework. We're going to go ahead and do a live example and see how this works in practice. So we're going to row gen an application. We'll call this one Metastore. And in this, we're going to generate a model. And we'll call this model person. And it will have name, age, and location. So this is, at this point, this is still just a standard Rhodes app. We'll go ahead and open this up in our editor. What we're going to do now is add a link here to our person controller. Go ahead and save that. We'll go to person model and enable syncing. Save that. So the next thing we're going to do is generate our row sync portion. So we'll say row sync app Metastore server. And then we're going to add a model here. Let's see, we're going to add a source, is what it's called here. Row sync source person. So now we have the matching person source for our application. We'll go ahead and open this in an editor and put in some default values here to start with. Open our sources person. So for query, we'll put in some results here. We have basically we're just creating some results here so we can see them in our application. Save this file. We'll just comment these out since we're not going to be doing any of the other functions here in RowSync. We'll save that. Now we will make sure our row config here has our link to our source adapter. At this point, we've done nothing more than standard Rhodes work. So now that we've saved that, we're going to run our RowSync server. So first we start Redis. Since that's running, we'll detach that, and now we will start RowSync. So our RowSync server is running. We're going to go back to our application and launch our client. So what we're going to see is a standards road application syncing with our backend, not using metadata at this time. And so I'm just going to give an example of what the differences is when you're using metadata versus when you're not using metadata. So we have our meta store. You can see there's people, there's no people. So we'll go ahead and log in. Go back to our home page. So now we have our 3 people that we've added. Has our name, age, and location, synchronized with our RowSync server. So to add metadata to your application, there's a few things that you need to do. First, you need to install the Rhodes Metadata gem. So if I do a gem list Rhodes Metadata, or I believe it's the Rhodes translator. You can see I have the Rhodes translator gem installed. This is a currently available gem. It's currently up on GemCutter, so if you just do a gem install Rhodes-translator, you will be able to pull that down. In our build.yaml, we need to specify the extension Rhodes translator. And this will indicate to the build scripts that we wish to use this extension, and it will pull in the code from that translator gem that we've just installed. The final thing that we need to do is in our source adapter here, we need to add a method called metadata. So in this method, this is where you would query your server for your field definitions and then generate your metadata. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put stuff in here to, just as an example, and we'll just hard code it for this time. So what we're going to want is to create pages for the various pages in our application, which is the index page, the new page, the show page, the edit page. And so we'll go ahead and start doing that now. So we start with an index page, and we'll give it a title. Let's see. We'll give it a title of meta index. Well, actually, the index base page is just going to be a view, so the title really does not matter. We'll give it a type of view, and a view is just a empty container. And then we're going to have some children. But since we haven't defined any other objects, we'll just leave that blank for now. So from our CSS webinar, there's three main sections to a page. There's the title, the toolbar, and the content. So we have metadata templates that exist already to implement those. So we'll call one called title. And then we'll change our title to meta people. And we'll give that the type of title. And we'll add this to the children of our main page. We'll also have a toolbar. So we'll give this the type of toolbar. We're going to give it a left URI. A right URI. And we'll give it some titles for the buttons. So we'll say left text, right text, and then we'll add our toolbar to our index. The next is our content section. So we'll go ahead and define that. And this is just going to have one child, which is a list that we'll create. So we'll just define the children is going to be a list. And we'll go ahead and add this to our main view here as well. And we'll just call this content. Our list is going to have a type of list. It's going to also have children, and this is going to be a repeatable element. So as I described the repeatable elements before, the repeatable element will iterate through a data source of an array, and it will create one child for each one. And since what we want to do is replicate the index page, which displays our lists of children, our lists of people, we're going to have a repeatable that goes over our people instance data. So we'll call this the repeatable. And then we do the data binding of people. And finally, we need to create the links to the various people from there. So what we're going to do is create another one called object link. And then we'll call this a type is a link list item. URI And so we're going to add a method to our model that will give us a URI for this object. So to access this, we will just call this show URI. So what happens is, inside a repeatable element, it will basically yield a person to each child. So the context of this data binding here will be an element of this array, and this is going to be our model. So we're going to create a method called show URI, which will give us the URI for that to click on. And we also want to give a name for this here, so we'll say the text is name. We'll save that. So what we've added here is a metadata definition for our index page. And so you sort of read this from the bottom up. You have an index which contains a title, a toolbar, and content. So then we have the title defined, our toolbar defined, and our content defined. Our content has a list. Here's the definition of our list. It's going to have children of object link, and it's going to repeat iterating through people, and we'll have show URI and name on that object link. The final step is to say which method this is going to be used for. So we're going to say our index method is going to use our index, and your result must return a JSON string, so we'll say to JSON. So what we've defined is a new page rendered for our metadata. So when the client loads and it has synced metadata, if the metadata exists, it will use that instead of our ERB view files. So let's go back to our application here. One thing we did was we added this thing called the show URI. So we need to implement that method on our person to ensure that that method exists when it goes to render. So we'll have metadata for that.